Right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us at this session. So this is an introduction to the community services dataset, specifically an overview for weight management service providers in relation to data that you have to provide in regards to the national obesity audits. So we've got a couple of guest speakers today who are going to talk through what is the community services dataset, how does the data that you're currently capturing and submitting to OHID relate to that, how does it map over. We've got a session taking place on the 16th of March, which will go much more into the practical side of things. So how do you submit your data? The plan for today is much more of an overview, showing you some of the tools that are available, showing you how to do things like get registered if you need to, where the onboarding tools are. But please do make use of the chat function to post any questions that you have. We'll try and get to as many as we can today. Anything that we can't answer during the session, we'll compile all the questions, get answers, and we'll send out an email after the session along with a copy of the slide deck from today and all the answers to questions that you've posed. So don't worry if we can't get a response for you on a particular subject today. So last couple of bits from me, a couple of bits of housekeeping. If I could ask everyone to keep their microphones on mute. We are recording the session as well, so for colleagues who are unable to attend, you'll be able to view it. We'll post it online, so you'll be able to view it. If you want to ask a question, like I said, use the chat, raise your hand, and we'll come to questions as we go through. But that's everything from me at the moment. I'll come back to you a little bit later. The next slide we've got just summarises the plan of action for today. So as I mentioned, an overview of the data set, an outline of how you'll capture your data through the community services dataset, outlining the registration onboarding processes, and then signposting to key documents, materials, and support as well. So I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Kate Croft, who's going to take us through the next section of the presentation.
Yeah, morning everyone. Oh, it's not morning anymore, is it? Afternoon everyone. I'm Kate Croft. I head up the analytical team at NHS Digital, who analyse all the data which is submitted to the community services dataset, and we also work with providers to ensure you can submit the data and also work with you to improve the data quality. Next slide, please. I'm going to run through at high level what the community services dataset is, and then there's various links so you can find out more information. And we abbreviate community services dataset to CSDS, which is one of our patient level secondary uses datasets. We've got a number of these large datasets across NHS Digital, and what it does is allow collection of national consistent data which we can compare over time and against each providers. And for the community services dataset, all community services are in scope if they are publicly funded. So the intention with all of these datasets are that they reuse clinical and operational data for purposes other than direct patient care. So that's why it's a secondary uses dataset. And the dataset as a whole consists of 37 different tables. So we have one table around person demographics and then various other tables so we can collect all the different data. However, you will not need to be familiar with all 37 tables. If you only provide weight management services, then there are certain fields and tables you will need to complete, but you won't need to complete everything. And the last point on that slide was just to make you aware that all the data is person level identifiable, so that we can that enable us to link the data, so we can link patients across time, across different submissions, but also then to other data sets. As providers, you will be submitting this data monthly to a web-based submission platform which we call STCS Cloud, the Strategic Data Collection Service. You need to submit monthly data, and for each month you have two periods you can submit for. So we have what's called a primary submission window, which is then followed by a refresh submission window. And within each of those submission windows, you can submit your data as many times as you like. each time you submit the data, you will get some data quality information back, and you can use that to improve your submission. And then what we do once the submission window closes, we take the last good file that was submitted. So that means the last successful file that was submitted. So if your last file was actually rejected, we would take the last good submitted, successful submitted file. And CSDS has actually been going for a number of years, so it's been live since October 2017, and a number of community services already submit that data. Within that time, there has been a version change. So we started with version 1, we then moved to version 1.5, which is what we're on at the moment. And then we will be moving to a new version 1.6 in July. And just to let you know that aggregate data is published by NHS Digital on a monthly basis, and you can see what we publish through the link there. Next slide. So in terms of CSDS and weight management services, so a number of you from Tier 2 weight management services will be currently submitting to the OHID's minimum data set, which has been set up as a temporary collection for this year. That data from April 22 is transferring to NHS Digital's CSDS. There's a few exceptions which are on the next slide, which I'll go through in a minute. As I mentioned, by submitting the data to CSDS, it's going to allow us to link the data to other data sources, and that will be able to give us a really rich picture of what's going on in weight management across the whole service, and that data will then be used to support the National Obesity Audit, which also launches in April. And we'll be publishing and releasing various pieces of information to inform people about the National Obesity Audit and what the obesity picture is across the country. And as I mentioned, there is a new version of CSDS coming in July. It's not a major change to the data set, but some of the fields are changing, and in particular, there's an addition of so we can better identify both adult and children weight management services. But we'll be providing more full description of exactly what you need to submit now and how it will change in 1.6. Next slide, please. So this slide is actually from the webinar on the 10th of February from OHID, just summarising what data is moving to CSDS. So all activity funded by the 22-23 grant should be submitted to us at NHS Digital through CSDS. However, where the 21-22 grant is continuing, the data should be continued to be submitted to the OHID minimum data set. There's a bit more detail about that there. And then over time, obviously, as services funded by the 21-22 grant are completed, there'll be less submission continuing to OHID collection. Next slide. And then the next couple of slides are some links to some documentation about what's included in the CSDS. So there's which sets out the legal basis, exactly what is included in the CSDS. There's a data model on there, and then next page. And then we've got what is called a enhanced technical output specification. So that lists all of the fields which are included in CSDS and also contains all of the derivations. So the fields that you submit, we then calculate new derived fields from that. So for example, where you submit date of birth, we will derive age rather than using date of birth in most cases. And then there's some further user guidance for you to read. We've put both versions of the documentation on there, version 1.5 and 1.6, because of that change in July. What I'd recommend, though, is Tom in a minute is going to go through some of our more basic guidance that we've developed over the last year. I would recommend you read what Tom is going to refer to first, and then once you've got a better understanding, and it's in a bit more plainer English and should be easier to read. Once you've read all of that and watched the videos which are on there, I would then recommend that you go and look at these documents, because if you look at these documents first, they're quite technical, and it'll help if you already have a good understanding. And have you got another slide? No. Thank you.
Community services data set.
So I'll pass on to Tom. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, no, don't worry. Okay, thank you very much. So my name's Tom Poupart. I'm Analytical Section Head for Data Quality at NHS Digital, and I'm just going to run through a bit of an overview of this process, some sort of start, not quite to finish, but this is a really quite a high level overview. What we'll do in future sessions is we'll go into this in much more detail. So this is an overview. I'm going to talk about some of the guidance that Kate mentioned, and yeah, we'll pick up a lot more of the detail in later sessions. So I'm talking about onboarding here, and just to clarify, by onboarding, it's basically the process that takes a provider to the point at which they can start submitting data. So we're onboarding people, we're bringing people who have never registered, never done anything, up to the point at which they can make submission. So there's quite a few stages in the process. And as Kate mentioned, we've got an online step-by-step guide. What I will be doing in a second is trying to battle technology and take control of this presentation and sort of do a bit of a live demo of some of the guidance, so you can sort of follow it through as I go. But yeah, we've got this guidance available. It was written to be a step-by-step process, so it follows logically on. It's tried to be in plain English. Again, as and when you use this guidance, please raise any queries, any problems, anything like that to help us improve the guidance as we go. But that was the intention when we wrote it in the first place. At the moment, it is very generally aimed at CSDS as a whole. It hasn't got specific areas of guidance around weight management at the moment, but that is something that will be coming along in future. Also, as Kate mentioned, we've got videos. So there's an entire section on videos, because we understand entirely that some people prefer to read, some people prefer to, follow along a video where it actually demonstrates everything. So there's a load of pre-recorded videos that take you through each of the steps as well. So what I'll do first then is, if I can go to the next slide, please, Ryan. As I said, I think you'll get the slide deck. So here I'm going to do the demo. There's the link to it there again, as it was on the previous page, and I'll try and take control. So bear with me 1 second. Hopefully this will work. So hopefully you can see a web page now that is called Community Services Dataset, CSDS Guidance. So this is the landing page for the for that guidance link. It's basically a top level, and as that last slide that I just sort of moved away from had, it has different sections within it. So within each of these sections, there's written guidance, and then at the very last section, we've got the videos. So what I'll do is I'll just jump to some of these sections and talk through some of the key points, some key areas. So the first one, the first biggie, is probably registration. So this page here takes you through the sort of 3 key stages of registration. The first one is to work out whether you've got an ODS code already, or an organizational data service code. Many providers, such as yourselves, won't, so there'll be a need to register for one of these. There is a whole series of guidance on how to do that. What we can do is I'll try and take you through the actual process of doing that, and or searching now. It is live, so something's bound to go wrong, but I'll try and take you through it now. So the way to find out whether you've got one already or not is you would use our organization search, and from there you can type in the name of the organization, the type of organization, part of the address, and then I'll let us search for something. So I think I'm just going to try, I might try, well, Leeds is going to bring back lots of things, but so from here, you should be able to find all the things that have got Leeds in their name. Not saying any of your organizations will have, but there you'll be able to see whether you've got an existing ODS code, which is in this column here. If you can't find your organization within this function, then that means you need to request one. The guidance on how to request one of these fields is available here at the Organization Data Service page, and again is explained in some of the videos later on. Once we've got to the point of getting your organization registered with ODS, so having a code in the first place, what you'll need to do then is you'll need to register your information governance lead. So this might be a Caldecott Guardian, your CIRO or Senior Information Risk Owner, or an Information Asset Owner. So once this individual is registered, there's again guidance here, which I'll take us through. Oh, apologies, wrong button. There's again guidance on how to register an individual. It's a very straightforward form, which requires sign-off from your organization. And here you can register either you've got Caldecott Guardian, Information Asset Owner, or the CIRO as mentioned previously. There's lots of additional information on here. It's quite a simple one-page form that then lets you submit it to our teams, and then that lets you then register people to start submitting data. So once you've got a registered organization code and you've got an information governance lead, you'll be able to see whether you've got, you'll be able to start checking and registering people to submit data. One thing I just want to jump back to is actually if you've already got an ODS code, so if I just pick one of these, let's just pick one. Just pick this one, hopefully it'll work. No, not helpful. I should have planned a bit ahead. If I put in teaching hospital, I'll try this one. Within this, you're usually able to see whether you've got a information governance lead already registered if your organization has got one. So I should have come up with a better and pre-made example, but I'll move on from that now. But within that first bit there where you can check whether you've got a code, it'll also tell you whether you've got someone registered as an IG lead. So the next bit is a DUC form or data user certificate form. And what this does is it lets you register those individuals who will be submitting data for your organization. Once you've completed that form and sent it off, you are essentially in a position where you are ready to start submitting data because you've got everything signed off, ready to go. So there is a load of guidance on how to use passwords and things like that. But what I think the really important bit I'm going to jump to now is we're going to have all the information on how to use the various ways of using access to submit the data or XML. And what I want to jump to now is the videos to show you some of the content within the videos that will be really useful for these areas that I've just sort of skimmed over. So we have sort of short 5 to 10 minute videos on registration, on how to use and download the tools from our database. So this is the access bit in here. They are videos, they're just taking a second to load in. But we've also got, we appreciate for many people, maybe this is the first time they're using Access and things like that. So we've got a sort of guide into how to use Access. And then as you can see on this left-hand side, we've got various different videos on different stages of the process. Again, if there are elements of the process that you find are missing or not clear, then please let us know and we'll feed that back into the guidance that exists. So yeah, that's what I really wanted to do, give you a bit of an introduction and point you towards these summary pages that take you through the various different steps. At every single point, you can always jump back to the sort of the summary here and move between the various sections as you move your way through sort of submitting data. So it'll go through registration, sending your data, and right the way through to once you started submitting your data, how to handle any of the feedback you get when you submit the data, which is something that Kate alluded to earlier. So everything's in there. Like I said before, we will be doing a sort of much more detailed session on all of this later on as part of the webinars. So Ryan, I don't know if you can take back control and jump back to the slides where I'll just do a bit, a last sort of summary of all the different things I talked about there. Great, thank you very much, Ryan. So you can jump to the next slide, that'd be fantastic. So the key bit here is sort of next steps. So for yourselves on this call, the first thing to do is use guidance and work out whether you've got an organizational data service code already and start the process for registering for one if you don't. then work out whether you've got an information governance lead registered already. If not, then you'll need to follow the forms for that. Then the next stage is to start registering the people who will be submitting the data. As part of that process, there will be a two-factor authentication that needs setting up. Again, that's all covered within the videos, so please watch them. If we can go to the next slide. So after that, once you've registered and basically got to the position in which you can submit, the next part is to try and understand what you should be submitting. There'll be a lot more sort of fuller and more detailed guidance on what actually needs to be submitted for weight management services, which will be made available soon. Then when you're submitting the data, you will be using an Access database or using an XML file to submit the data to the SDCS cloud. There is guidance on how to use those, and all that sort of detail is available at those links on these pages. We've also got the submission dates here. So for April data, it can be submitted within those periods, 27th of April to 24th of May. And then we'll be talking about submitting the refresh data, which is the sort of second cut of that data, from the 25th of May to 16th of June. If none of this makes sense currently, don't worry. We'll be going through a lot more of this within the sort of following up meetings and the sessions that we'll be having. And the final thing that I mentioned is once you've actually made a submission, we'll talk you through how to read and use the reports that you get back on that data. There may be all sorts of elements that are rejected, or it may highlight warnings that come up. What we'll do is we'll talk through how to interpret those, how to use that information to improve your submission and make sure the data flows. So I think that's everything from me, Ryan. I think if we go on to the next slide. Great. So I think I'm passing over to you, Ryan.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Kate. So the next couple of slides are just about the support that we're offering to providers to bring you up to speed on the use of CSDS. So from us, we've sent out emails to all providers who we've been told are providing weight management services and guidance and signposting where to find support materials, the support materials that Tom's just gone through this afternoon. We are going to be issuing technical guidance on tables and specific data that's required for submission to for weight management service providers. Again, that should be coming shortly. The document is in sort of the final review stage at the moment. I don't think it's going to be too far off at all. I know Kate mentioned earlier, the community services data set is a large data set made up of 37 tables, but actually the elements that you're going to need for the work you're doing is much smaller than that. And so this tailored guidance will provide you that steer on that. What we're also doing is providing a series of technical webinars. So this is the first one. This is intended to be an overview, relatively kind of high level with regards to the process. But next, on the 16th of March, we're going to have a much more technical session. So really going into the practicalities of getting yourself set up, submitting the data, as Tom said, understanding the validation rules as they come back and seeing the issues that you might encounter there. So much more in-depth session. That first one on the 16th, there'll be a repeat of that or a similar version of that in May as well. And then at the end of March, we're going to have another session which is part overview, so covering what we've gone through in this session and the session on the 16th, but then also allowing a bit more time for Q&A as well, because what we're going to do throughout March and April is have fortnightly drop-in sessions, half-hour drop-in sessions where you can come in and ask any questions. So you've got a bit of time to go away, read some of the materials and come back with any sort of questions or concerns that you might have and get some on-the-spot feedback from myself and colleagues here at NHS Digital. Also to point out, there are sort of dedicated points of contact as well for any issues that you've got with CSDS. So there's a DQ mailbox that you can see here, and there's also the National Service Desk mailbox. So they're more kind of technical submission issues and registration issues. So if you've got issues with user profiles or things like that, you can go through to the National Service Desk. But any issues that you have around sort of data quality and understanding the sort of validation problems, you'd go through to the DQ email address. But again, we're going to cover that in much more detail over the next few weeks. You'll have more materials provided to you, so you don't have to worry about taking all that in right now. We will cover this again in future sessions. So that's the end of the formal presentation. So we've got time now for questions, and I know we've had quite a few in the chat, so I'm just going to go back into the chat now. Is there anyone who's posted something in the chat and they haven't had a response yet and would like to raise their hand and talk directly to the team here? Just going through. Shirley, did you get a response? I think you've had a response from Kate on your question, which was, so Shirley asked, can we confirm, please confirm data for 21-22 we were told would be under the old system on sending data. I believe you've just said that it will transfer. Oh, sorry, and then you've responded again saying sorry that you've answered that now. So Kate did clarify that with the slide from colleagues at OHID, and again we'll send the slide deck out, so if you want that for reference you'll have those materials there. Next question was from Reese Ratcliffe, which was had a confirmation by email yesterday that as a service provider delivering 21-22 using the minimum data sets that we'd continue to use that unless awarded 22-23 contract. Yes, so that's correct. I had a question from Holly May about it would be good to understand what fields are mandatory for weight management service providers. So initial feedback from community groups was that some people will not want to share identifiable information. It would be a shame if they then couldn't join a tier 2 program as a result. Were we able to answer that question? I haven't seen.
Yes, yeah, so I put an answer to that. So there's very few fields which are mandated, which means that the data won't flow without them. We do have a lot of what we class as required fields. So those are fields that we really want you to submit because it then helps us use the data. And those identifiable fields are generally classed as required fields. So the data can flow, for example, without an NHS number. But what it means is we will then try and use other identifiable information to link up the data. So, and we're doing that linkage for several different reasons. We want to be able to link to other data sets, but also we need to be able to link within CSDS to be able to track patients over time. So if in your April submission you had someone who'd been referred in, they'd maybe had a couple of weight management sessions, then in your May data, if they're having further weight management sessions, and then by the time they finish, we want to be able to tell that that's the same patient over time, and that's why we need as much identifiable data as can, so we can identify distinct people.
Thanks, Kate. The next comment was just if we could have a link to the step-by-step guide in the chat, and Dan McCauley shared that for us, so thanks for doing that, Dan. A few attendees had issues being able to see the screen share as Tom was presenting. So I've noted it's been captured on the recording. So at the very least, you'll be able to view the recording again. Hopefully you were able to disconnect and rejoin the session and were able to see the screen share after that. So I hope that resolved it for you. I've noticed we've got a hand up, which I think is it Jenny Thompson? Do you want to come in with your question?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm in North Yorkshire. We're currently submitting core public health funded participant data, as well as the 21-22 grant funded participant data to OHID. So my question is, from April, do I need to separate those? Because I know that for the 21-22 grant funded participant data, you want us to continue submitting to OHID. Should we continue submitting to OHID the core funded participant data as well, or do you want to start separating it and submit the core funded participant data to CSDS? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we've got someone from OHID on the call. I think I saw Paul Nibbler join, or Caroline, or whether they would be better to answer it, if you don't mind. If you can unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That example, it would be to submit the public health funded participants from 22-23 to the CSDS.
Okay, so you would want it separated then?
Yeah, so the OHID collection will only ever have people funded by 21-22 money in it.
Okay, so
yeah.
At the moment, we submit all participant data to OHID, including the core funded participants